It's Wednesday? It's Wednesday, right?
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Welcome in, guys. My name is Tony Acosta. I am a principal broker and former member of the Forbes Real Estate Council. If you're new here, that's the scoop. It's my boy, Boo.
Boo Maddox, team lead of the Perry Group, the #1 real estate team in Utah, #1 real estate team in Real Broker. We'll see if that holds this year. We've added some hitters this year.
It will hold.
We've added some hitters this year. Number 26 team in the country, soon to be number 25.
Let's go with top 25.
So we want to be top 25. Welcome in, everybody. We're very excited. We're having a lot of fun with this. It has been very interesting to see. I'm realizing that a lot of real estate agents complain about the same thing, just in different tones, just with different verbiage.
Yep.
So we're going to continue to find different things to highlight, different people to point out, different people to call out even.
Yes.
And you're on my radar today, so
Oh,
just be aware.
Let's go.
Roll it, Tiggy.
All right, this was mine. Had my biggest closing ever, $4 million. How would a responsible agent spend it? What would you do? Would you ball out a little bit? I feel like you would. I feel like you'd ball out a little bit for like the first 48 hours after you closed.
Yeah.
You'd definitely go to Tucano's twice. Or where would you go? I'd go to Tucano's twice.
I go to Corn Bellies.
This dude in Corn Bellies.
I go to Corn Bellies. Hyper local. You know, I think that my opinion has changed dramatically. I think when I first started in the business, I had some of these months where I was closing $6, $7, $8, $10 million, and my lifestyle absolutely changed. But I think part of why agents struggle so much in this business is because it is a cyclical business. There are times where you're going to have a feast, and then there are other times where you're going to have famine. So to me, I am setting some money aside at this point. #1 for taxes. I think there's agents that forget about taxes, and then when Uncle Sam comes knocking,
I got caught.
then they're like, okay, HELOC, credit cards, something to make this payment. Yep. They go get a new car, and their expenses grow as their business grows, as their income grows. If you can do whatever you can to keep your income growing with your expenses staying fixed, this business becomes a lot more manageable and a lot more doable. And I think there's too many agents that forget that. I think the other portion too that people grossly underestimated, when I was selling 200 houses a year, I was reinvesting at minimum 10% back into my business. 10% just straight into marketing. And what did that look like? I remember the first Christmas that I was ever working with the Perry Group, I went to Best Buy and I bought $3,000 worth of just stuff. And just walked around like Santa Boo Claus in the office, just handing out headphones and handing out speakers and handing out all sorts of stuff. Why? That was my marketing budget. There's too many agents that get a paycheck and they forget that a big portion of this needs to go back into the front end of your business in order to ensure that you have more $4 million closings like this.
No doubt. So I think the concept is, and I learned this early on, because I got caught with the tax thing, because real estate school doesn't teach you any of this. No. I think that's a massive problem, right? So I got caught first couple of years of my career, the tax thing, the expense thing. So run your business like a business. And here's what I mean by that. To your point, you should have a marketing budget. But also, in any serious company out there, there's company money and then there's personal money. And you're not allowed to touch company money. Like, people go to jail for that. If you take company funds to do personal stuff, you go to jail. Yet we as real estate agents, we do that all the time. Co-mingling of funds, exactly. So I get it. I understand when you're building. Sometimes it can sound a little bit over the top when somebody says, hey, you need to save 25% of your income. And you're like, my brother, I need 110% of my income. Like, what are you talking about? So I get it. I'm empathetic to that. But resist the temptation to say, oh, I'll get it organized when I make more money. So even if you start small, even if the marketing budget is $50 a month, it's more about the habit so that once you have these kinds of months, it doesn't pinch as bad. And so run your business like a business, reinvest, and you'll be fine. But if you overextend yourself and then you have 2, 3, 4, 5 months that you don't have closings like this, and now your expenses doubled or tripled, now you're in a tough spot.
I think what it comes back to me is that you can have one of these months accidentally. You can stumble into a $4 million listing because your brother's friend referred you over somebody. This can happen accidentally. It cannot happen accidentally month after month after month after month unless you force it to. There is no accidental, there is no coincidence within this business. This is a business that you get in what you put into it, very much so, and I think agents forget that at times. So if you want to have another $4 million month, what are you doing in order to make sure and ensure that your business is going to have another $4 million month? It requires reinvesting.
Run your business like a business, peeps.
Next, Tingy.
Oh, no. Here we go. Hey, I'm actually proud of this one.
Analogy.
This is a great one,
This is a good analogy.
Phenomenal.
I'm not talking crap on you for this. The analogy that most deeply impacted me as a new agent was that the airplane takeoff analogy. An airplane at rest, and I have to translate this because you're using emojis. An airplane at rest must generate enormous amounts of force and use a large percentage of their fuel supply to get off the ground. The force and fuel used to take off is massively larger than what is required to cruise at altitude. This applies perfectly to any new entrepreneur. The force and effort required to get off the ground is massive versus that of someone already cruising. And this is why I think this is so important. In this industry, top producers get put on a pedestal.
Yes.
And they say what they are doing in their business that day in order to make it successful. My opinion is that for the majority of agents that are in the thrust period of this, the massive lift portion of this, they are not going to be in that same things, and their business does not need the same amount of energy and force. But those are the people that we put on a pedestal.
100%. So all of a sudden we'll go on social media, we'll go on YouTube, and we'll see top producer morning routine. And it's like, all right, I'm going to get up, I'm going to stretch, I'm going to eat 37 almonds, then I'm going to go meditate. That's my top producer morning. And so someone that isn't a top producer looks at that and says, oh, that's what I have to do. No, my guy, you have to make 200 calls. Or you have to make 20 pieces of content. Or you have to, like, it's not the same. And so at first, you have to generate so much momentum. And that's from daily activities. Yesterday in class, I brought up Brett as a great example of that. Brett on our team is planning to do 30 open houses in 30 days. That's ambitious. 30 open houses in 30 days is very, very ambitious. And so that's what it requires. Now, somebody that is already a top producer is probably not going to do 30 open houses in 30 days. They're just not. But for somebody that is getting started, that is what is going to give you the reps. That is what is going to give you the confidence. That is what is going to allow you to then start to scale. But resist the urge and the temptation to try to copy a top producer's lifestyle today when you're not there yet. You have to generate momentum over time that can eventually get you off the ground.
Yeah, I want to run everybody through because I think that this is super important for people to understand. I sold 200 houses in a year. Before I sold 200 houses in a year, let me explain to you how I got there. I realized that my best source of transactions, my best lead source was from model homes because I was working in new construction at the time. What would I do in order to ensure, because I got 3 days in a model home, I wanted 6. How did I get those? I used to call agents and lie to them. I used to call the agents that I knew didn't want to sit model homes, and I'd be like, hey, Tony, I have it on my schedule I'm supposed to cover for somebody today. Was that you? And what would every one of them say?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, it was. So how did I force my business to take off that early on? It was by calling and forcing those conversations and forcing myself into a position where I could go and actually get myself in front of those leads at a higher level.
But that implies doing twice as much work as the minimum. And that's where we fall short. We underestimate the amount of work that it takes. It's not 10 social media videos, it's 200, right? It's not 20 calls, it's 300 calls. And so that's what it takes. So a top producer, we all have those kinds of stories of, hey, it wasn't always like this. Here's where I started. If there's a top producer out there watching this, tell that story. Tell this. Don't just show the 37 almonds, the meditation and stretch
the
routine.
5 a.m. club.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Some people find value in that. That's fine. But that's not necessarily what is going to generate business. What generates business is those income producing activities. Don't eat as many almonds. Make more phone calls.
Okay, so that has to wrap it up for me today. I forgot I have an interview right now. Do you want to keep going? Or
Leave.
do you want
Get
to,
out of here.
You're going to keep going?
Leave.
All right. Peace.
Guess it's the Tony Acosta show in the morning now.
It's all you, baby.
No, we got 2 more. Here we go. Selling agent. In your ads, you say you're a top producer, but I checked your numbers and you haven't had a closing in over a year. Listing agent says the rules were you guys weren't going to fact check. Here's the thing about top producers, you guys. Nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows what that means. If you sell 2 houses that are $500,000, now all of a sudden you are in the millionaire club, $1 million club. Get rid of those kinds of stats. Get rid of those kinds of labels that nobody understands. It's more about proof over promise. What is verifiable? What have you actually done? Instead of using those fancy or sexy clickbait words like top producer, you think that is impressive, it's actually not. So how many homes have you sold? Have you sold 100? Have you sold 200? Have you sold 300? Have you sold 50? Use numbers, not just words, because everybody's a top producer. Everybody's the number 1 agent, and you guys see it. Go to any real estate out there, number 1 agent, number 1 this, top that. It doesn't mean anything to anybody because everybody uses it. So find other ways to differentiate yourself besides these buzzwords that people think are cool. All right, next one, Dingy. Do you prefer the buy side or sell side, and why? So I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on this because I started, like many agents do, on the buy side. So I started as a buyer agent for many years. I was a showing agent. I was the dude that went, opened the door, and that was about it. I wouldn't even send contracts out first because I didn't know how to do it. So recently, I've transitioned a little bit into the listing side. Right now, I have 13 active listings. The reason why I did that is because I just had a baby, and I wanted to be able to have more time with her because when my son was born, my son is 8 years old. When my son was born, I was heavy in the buy grind. I was heavy into showings. I was in that phase, that takeoff phase that we just talked about. I was in that phase. So I feel like I missed a lot of things with my son. And so I wanted this to be a little bit different. So I transitioned into the listing side. What I'll say is that as a listing agent, some people will make the argument that you have more control. I actually don't think that's true. Here's what I mean by that. Yes, you can control to some degree the pricing. You can control the marketing strategy. You can control when an open house is done or is not done. But your client essentially is completely beholden on you and your activities. When you're on the buy side, there's a little bit, in my opinion, there's a little bit more control in the sense of you know who the lender is, maybe it's your preferred lender, you go to multiple properties, you have more than one option. So if you lose an offer over here, you can go submit an offer over there. So there's a little bit more variety of activities that you can do to get a good result. When you're on the list side, you're dependent on the buyer, you're dependent on the buyer's financing, and so there are a lot of unknowns and a lot of factors that make it a little bit more challenging. Not only that, but at least here in Utah, contracts, the Rep C is very, very buyer friendly. So what I mean by it's buyer friendly is that the buyer has outs all over the place. They can get out of the contract for due diligence, for financing, appraisal. They can cancel the contract for many different reasons. The seller cannot. The seller is basically locked in unless they pay an equivalence of the earnest money as damages. So it's harder for a seller to get out of a contract than it is for a buyer. If all of a sudden a buyer says, hey, I'm not feeling this anymore, they can cancel and go find another property, go find another area, go do something else. Once a seller signs that contract, they're largely locked in unless they want to write a check. And so nuances, pros and cons, but on the buy side, there's just more of a variety of things that you can do. So that was 4, right? All right, guys. Hey, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Like, subscribe, do that whole thing. We're going to be live on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, possibly on Facebook here soon in a little bit. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.